Hello everyone, I've been replaying a game recently. I've been wanting to go back and do a New Game Plus or go through again Lost Odyssey on the Xbox 360. And it was a game that was on my radar for a long time. I just never dug into, and then a couple of years ago I finally played it, wanted to replay it, and it had me thinking of a few games that are games I always enjoyed, but I actually like more as time goes on. I feel like over the years your opinion can change a little bit on some games. Some games you maybe like a little bit less as time moves on, they get a little stale. Other games I find a new appreciation for. And this had me thinking of that because this would be one of those games. So I'm going to talk about a couple games briefly that are all games I really like, all games that are on my top 100 ever, but they've actually gone up over the years in that ranking. They are games that I've had greater fondness for over time. This is one of them because I've been enjoying it even more my second time through. First time through, I knew I was going to like it. It's my brother's favorite game. It's by the creator of Final Fantasy, Mistwalker Studios, and I knew I was going to enjoy this going in. And I think I appreciate it so much more and enjoy it even more my second time going through because it really feels in many ways like the last of a style, the last of an era. It feels like the last of those SNES, PS1, PS2 era turn-based RPGs, the prime of a series like Final Fantasy, which after 12 I really have not had any interest in until the Final Fantasy 7 remake, which I'll talk about a little bit. But yeah, this to me feels like the end of that style. There are still a lot of great RPGs these days, including some of my all-time favorites, but they're very different from the more traditional JRPG style that we know and love, that sort of Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, that type of RPG I feel like is not as plentiful anymore and has been sort of relegated around this time frame more to handhelds. You found more of those on the DS and the PSP and the 3DS, and we're starting to see a little resurgence of JRPGs, which is fantastic, but not as many in the more traditional kind of turn-based form that this really inhabits. I mean, this has always been, this is a Final Fantasy, it's not a Final Fantasy. Change the spell names, throw in some chocobos and moogles, and this is like the Final Fantasy 13 for real, and better than the actual Final Fantasy 13. But yeah, just a brilliant game that I actually like more the second time I'm playing it through. And even as I was thinking about replaying it, just thinking back on that experience, it has climbed up that list. Another one that every decade or so I think about again and maybe replay, and I just like it more and more each time because to this day, even though it has a sequel, it still feels unique because the sequel is very different and not quite as good. But Legend of Legaia on PS1, this is such a brilliant RPG that was overlooked at the time and I think is still just kind of a cult classic. It really has never been a mainstream hit ever, but it is one of the best and one of the most unique RPGs on the PS1. And its three main characters, its storyline, its themes, its musical score, everything about it just has a particular vibe that has really been easy for me to reconnect with every time I've re-explored it, and I just like it more and more as time goes on. It's a game I always enjoyed, but like another game I'm going to talk about here in a moment, I played it during a time when I was playing more video games than just about any other time in my life, spending a lot of time playing video games, and most of those were RPGs, and it was during what I consider to be the golden age of RPGs. So as much as I enjoyed it, it was just one of many that I enjoyed. But over the years, I've come to love it more and more, and just fascinating game. You have to check that one out. And another one that feels kind of odd being on here, and but it is one that I actually have a greater appreciation for as time moves on, and that's Final Fantasy VII. Game that's always been one of my absolute favorites, but it means more to me as time goes on for similar reasons to The Legend of Legaia. I mean, this was, I'd always played RPGs and I liked Final Fantasy before this, but this is the thing that turned me into a console gamer, turned me into an RPG fan. Really, this was the game that made that my preference when it comes to video games. And to this day, it's one that, because of that, I have such a strong nostalgic attachment to it, but it really just means more over time because, again, this was like Legend of Legaia. amazing, but one of many amazing experiences around the same time. But it's just one that I remember more fondly and go back to more as time moves on, and I actually like it more so than I originally did even back then. It really stands the test of time better than some of its contemporaries, and that I really was thinking about more as I was playing the Final Fantasy VII remake, the Part 1 there, about how much that original title really means to me more than even I realized. And the last one that I've been thinking about recently because it's one that I am still pretty shocked has not had a remaster of any kind or straight port or whatever, but definitely a remaster to the Switch or Xbox, PS4, or even like a Steam release. I don't think it has, but I'm really surprised this does not have a remastered release on PS4 and Switch already. We'll see what the future holds, but Skies of Arcadia. This is such a remarkable game, and like I was saying with Legend of Legaia uniqueness, this is even more so to that extreme. I've never played anything quite like it, and at the same time, it also the core of the game is very traditional RPG from the era of the 90s into the early 2000s. It takes that to that familiarity and that sort of comfort zone and that style that I really like, and adds such a unique element that's never been quite replicated. And it has one of the greatest senses of adventure and exploration I've ever experienced. I think the only thing, as far as just exploration-wise, that I think is better is is the original Xenoblade Chronicles. It really ranks up there in that element, and it's such a fun, remarkable, and memorable experience. And I think a lot of RPGs, even these days, are missing some of that just colorful fun element. I think sometimes even some of the better ones really try and gear themselves a little bit too towards the dark and the gritty, which is good, but it's not good if that's all there really is. And sometimes it feels like a lot of the better ones more recently are going more in that direction. And sometimes you just want to have a fun experience, just a great adventure, and this is like one of the best adventures you'll ever get to experience. I really hope this gets a remaster for PS4 or Switch, and I'm very surprised it has not, because this is one that people ask about all the time and would do really well in that form. But we will see what happens in the future. So those are just a few games that over the years, the games I always enjoyed to begin with, but I've liked a little more as time has moved on, and I'd love to hear what are some games you've had a similar experience with, where you enjoyed them, but when you look back, you like them a lot more than you even realized, or is there anything that you've kind of fallen out of love with over the years? I'd love to hear your comments below, and I'll see you next time.